Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to go through the process of setting up the rest of our controls for Rocket Randee. These are the uncoded controls, so there'll be no expressions used in this. And we'll also go through the process of setting up his core and parenting everything and getting some basic controls in there to keep the rig nice and simple so that we don't have to work with all the original Photoshop layers. So this will set up a pretty easy to use control rig. We also have to touch on fixing up the pelvis one last time before we can call this 3/4 puppet essentially finished.
So if we use belt center as our primary center object, we could create controllers for this so that we don't have to deal with geometry or layers. So I'm going to create just a controller here. And this should be called belt center. This one, what I'll do is I'm going to turn it yellow. Oops, I want it to be yellow. And I'll put it down here. And this one, I'm going to rename it to C center. And this will drive the primary puppet. That'll drive all the big stuff. We'll put this to 200, or we'll put this to 300, this one. And then I'm going to duplicate this one more time. And then I'm going to call this control master. And this will pretty much drive the entire puppet. Even though this actual layer isn't 100% necessary because of the way we're going to be animating this character. However, we will put it in anyways. Actually, no, we do need this. So I'm going to put this in here. There we go. And that'll be our master. And I'm going to scale this one up to significantly larger. We'll put this one to 500%. So this one, we will parent to the master. And there we go. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take the C center, which is the center of his body, and just make sure and I want to parent the center, this guy here, belt center to it. So let's go up here, and we have C center. So now, when the center is moved around, obviously everything goes with it, which is great. And the other thing I want to do is I want to parent the hands to the control center as well. So I'm going to take the hand left and right and parent them to the C center, the control center, and then that way the hands will actually move with the puppet. When we actually do the coded version, we'll make it so we have a parenting switch so that these will follow or not follow depending on whether or not we switch. So you have the option of connecting the hands to objects and then letting the character move around, because right now they will always follow the center of the puppet. So our next thing that we want to rig up is the actual torso and the neck, which can be done. It typically has to be done manually for what we're actually doing, but we can create controls for all of this. So the next thing I want to do is actually select the hips. Now this is a bit redundant. You don't have to do this. You could actually just work with the puppet as is, because technically I can go to the hips right now. I can go to any of these elements and actually start rotating them around. So the pelvis, for instance, I can start rotating this and everything works. Like you can see that the legs and everything are responding as they need to. So I don't need to build a bunch of controllers for this. The only reason I would like to do this is it actually makes animating the character a little bit easier for me, because I'm not dealing with all these layers all over the place. Everything can be stacked up here at the top. So I'm going to create, I could just duplicate this actually, since the pelvis and the center are sort of in the same place. So we'll call this C pelvis. And this one, I'm just going to actually parent the pelvis to that instead of right now the pelvis is parented to the belt center, but I'm going to parent it to the pelvis center control. So if we have belt center, we should have, let's find it, pelvis right here. Right now it's parented to the center. I want to parent it to the pelvis. So what that will obviously do, and I can lock this away actually. And I can also we can lock the belt right here, belt center, because this is already parented away now. So now if we take a look at the actual pelvis, C pelvis, when I rotate this, the pelvis obviously goes with it the way we want it to. I'm just going to quickly unparent it so I can scale that up a little bit. Well, let's unparent this. I forgot, I should scale it up because I want everything pretty clear on what I'm grabbing. So I'm going to change the scale on this. I'll put this to 80. So now it's a little bit bigger. And if I want to, I can actually change the color of this as well to make it a little bit more clear. I can start to understand the difference between each one of my pieces. So this is the pelvis, this is the center. Probably actually should make the pelvis a bit smaller because I don't tend to animate that one a lot. Maybe we can put this down to 30%. Scale it up a little bit. In the end, it won't really matter because I'll be selecting them in a different way. So there's the pelvis. And actually, you'll make that brighter because it's so nestled back there. And let's go down to the pelvis and just lock it up. Great. Okay, so now I have a pelvis control. And that pelvis, actually, this pelvis control will drive the original pelvis. So now I just have to go to this pelvis here and parent it back to the C pelvis. There we go. Now I can just select C pelvis and I can control the pelvis, which is perfect. And then by the center control here, I can control the belt and the upper torso. And as you'll see, the hands actually stay orientated as well. So this is really quite a dynamic puppet in a way. So we have the hips. Now the last piece I want to make is a couple of controllers for, well, a couple of pieces I want to create here is a couple of controllers for the actual torso. And I'll be doing exactly the same thing. I'm just going to go to the actual torso layers here. I'm going to pull this up so it's a little more, I can see a little more. Let's go up to the torso layers. And again, because I don't want to be working with the actual layers, I'd like to work with just controllers. I'm going to create essentially little bones for each one of these things. So I'm going to create a controller for the torso skirt. I'm going to create a controller for the torso. And I'm going to create a controller for the upper torso as well. Not the straps. Okay, so torso, everyone else should be parented to torso front. So I can put a controller on this one. And that should give me everything I need. Just lock all of this for now. Okay, there we go. So let's go up here. So now we have torso skirt. And torso skirt will control the bottom of that shirt there. And its anchor point's way up there. So I'm going to scale this up a little bit. And these I'm going to make another, like in a unique color so that they're easy to see. So that'll be the torso skirt. And then we have the actual torso. So let's make that another color. I guess actually we could all make those ones the same color. So lavender, and we'll scale that one up. So this one will be 200. This will be 200. And then the last one, which is the torso front, which is up here, we'll scale that up as well to be 200. These are all just our key central controllers. Okay, so then we'll take this skirt here, the torso skirt, the actual torso skirt object. Go down to that. Okay, so there's the torso skirt, and we'll parent it to C torso skirt. And then the torso 2, we'll parent that to C 3/4 torso 2. And then for torso 1, we have torso 1 back. We want torso 1 front. We want to parent that to C torso 1 front. Unless I can lock each one of these. Actually, we'll lock everything. We're not going to be really controlling a lot of. Leave this for now. I'm going to just lock everything I don't need to work with. And this makes it also, if I go through and start locking everything, I'm not going to accidentally do anything that messes everything up. We can come back, obviously, and unlock things later. My goal is to get this down to a basic set of objects that I can use to control this character. So we'll just expand this up a little bit. So now when I select this, it drives the upper part of his body. This one drives this here. Now, something I need to do, which I didn't do yet, is actually parent these controllers to one another. So torso 1 parents here down to torso 2 so that they stay connected. And then torso skirt, which is currently moving on its own, that is going to parent to the actual center because I want it to be a little bit independent of this one. So if I move this, then I can just go into the skirt and rotate it slightly. I may even be able to add a little bit of code later to make that a little more dynamic, but right now I actually want it to move separately. So the torso skirt, we're going to parent to C center. And then torso 2 will also parent to C center. And remember, C center is sort of the primary object for everything. So if we grab C center, which is this guy here, everything comes with it. Yeah, C center. We parent C center, everyone should come with it. And actually, C pelvis, it needs to be parented to C center as well. So C pelvis should be parented to C center. So when we rotate C center, that is the whole body of the character. And let's get all these put up here. So I'm going to put all my center controls down, I guess down at the bottom here. Let's scale this up here. Let's bring these center controls here. These are all my center controls, like my core body controls. I'm going to bring them down right there. So I want everything here at the bottom. So now what I can do with this is my torso skirt's independent, so this can be rotated. I could just make it a giant chain, actually. That might work a little bit better. Now that I'm playing with it, I'm finding it might be a little better for it to be a chain. So C torso front, and I think I can change this name too. So we'll just call this C torso 1. C torso 2, and then C torso 1 is parented to C torso 2. C torso 2 is parented to the skirt, and then the skirt will be parented to the C center, which is the belt, and then the pelvis will be parented to the C center, and then C center will be parented to the master, and that will give us a nice little chain. So if I go in here and just click rotate on the rotate value, set this all to 0, put the character back where he was, and if I grab the torso all the way from the center up, and I rotate this, I get this nice curved, you see how he's curving really nicely there? I'm getting a nice curve on his back and his body. I get a nice bend in there. And obviously I can bend torso 1 a little further. So I get a pretty good range on the character doing it that way. The only thing I'm finding isn't really working is the pelvis, and I think we can address that in the next video, but we'll finish rigging up the neck and then we'll fix any problems with the puppet. There's a couple of ways you can handle this. I haven't really nailed the perfect solution for this. You can create a 3-chain or a 2-chain. So I'm just going to try to show you a couple of solutions that can work, and you can kind of just pick what you want to try working with. You can either create a controller at the head. So we're going to do that scenario first. If you create a controller at the head, and let's scale that up to 200. Okay, so for this scenario, we're going to select the head, and then we're going to select the neck. So we want to select the end of the chain first, then the neck, and then finally the head controller, IK creation. Now, what this does is you can essentially steer this head around. I find it not always the best scenario for this. A little bit of a weird way to control the head. I find it a little bit better just to take the head and animate it manually with the neck. So another alternative is actually creating a controller for the neck. So let's select the neck here. And I mean, this you can really experiment with. So we have the neck. I'm going to create a controller for the neck. Oops. Let's create a controller for the neck. And we'll scale that up to 200 and put it to lavender. So we've got this controller on the neck. As you could create a 3-chain with the actual torso controller pieces here. Okay, because of the way we've set these controllers up, if I want the neck to follow along, I need to parent this to the actual controllers and not to the actual torso itself, the front torso. So I'm going to parent this to the torso 1 controller. And then what I'll do is I'm going to select the neck first. That's going to be the end of our chain. Let's select this neck here. Neck. And then I'm going to control select both torso 1 and 2 controllers, torso 1, 2. And then I'll select the neck controller and IK creation. So now what should happen is when I use the neck controller, I can actually have this bendable torso, which I'm not sure if it's always the best way to work. Honestly, I find it a little bit hard to deal with. And as you may notice, the head's now moving a little strangely. So I also have to parent the head to the neck, because right now there is a neck that is a neck goal object. So that head needs to be parented to that neck goal object right there. And honestly, I don't find this is a very effective way to work. some, you know, like you can try it if you want, but I definitely don't feel it's the most intuitive way to work with a character. I find it's a little bit too limiting. So I typically try to avoid inverse kinematics down the spine, and I usually just manipulate those things manually. Unless you can get some coding, you could use some coding and create sort of spline kinematics like you might use in Maya. Essentially, I would avoid using that at all. And then I would just use these controllers and rotate them manually to actually get the spine movements and positions that you want. It's probably the best way to work. You have the most control over it. And it's just more of the forward kinematics. And then you have nice inverse kinematics on the actual body, essentially all the limbs, like no problem, saves you a lot of time. And then they all respond proportionately and properly to the rotations of the upper body. So you are still saving a ton of time. And then the neck and everything like that, you can continue to add some controllers to that. So if you want to create a neck controller and then finally a head controller, which I usually do, so you'll create your neck controller just like we did earlier and scale that right up to 200. And I'll make that a lavender. And then we'll create a head controller. So let's go find that head really quickly. So head, and then create a controller for the head. And make that a lavender or any color you really want. And we'll scale that up. We'll call that the head controller and for this specific setup. And then now we can just parent those two to one another. So the head can be parented to the neck. And what I'll end up doing is now parenting the original head here to the head controller, and then also parenting the neck here to the neck controller. Okay, and then parenting the head controller to the neck controller to the torso one. This is a little convoluted, but essentially you have all your controllers. So once you have all these controllers in place, you can select all the other layers, lock them, and then start hiding them away. You can just start plucking them away. And then this just leaves me with some really nice controllers, and I only really have to animate my character with these controller objects here. So I can select any of these without interrupting any of the original geometry that makes up this character. Oops, I accidentally parented, obviously, the neck. Turn this off. This is apparently parented to the wrong thing. The neck should be parented to the C torso 1. There we go. Accidentally parented it to the wrong thing. Okay, so these are all gone. So now what I can do with all these controllers is really, I can drive the whole character the way I need to when I'm animating him. And I don't really have to worry about messing around with any of the original geometry or dealing with any original pieces. And I have this really nice and basic setup for this character that seems to work the way I need it to. I have all these pieces, and I can animate them one piece at a time, which maybe it's not as intuitive as some methods, but it actually, I find it works pretty well for me. Okay, the only thing I need to fix is that hip. I don't really like what's going on with this hip. Actually, let's put everything back to 0. So everything's now back to 0. And I just want to rotate that pelvis and get a sense of what's actually going on here. So let's turn these guys so that we can see everything. Let's go down to the pelvis and find it here. Where's the pelvis? There it is. We have a pelvis, and I want to just isolate that and see where is it sitting and why is it looking like such a big gap. And the next thing we want to turn on is maybe the torso skirt and the center, the belt center. And let's also turn on, we'll turn on the top leg, because this is where I'm seeing the breakdown is with the actual leg at the top of the leg here. I'm seeing this giant gap, and this is not really going to work for me. So this needs to be fixed somehow. And I think that one of the problems is perhaps the pelvis isn't large enough. So one of the problems that I'm going to have here is if I want to scale this up or change it in any way, because it's actually these other objects are parented to it, it's going to make it difficult to scale this and everything, because the leg and everything want to follow with it. So one thing I can do is actually go to the legs and actually parent them not to the pelvis, but to the pelvis controller. That is an option if I need to do some fixes. So let's do that really quickly. Let's go to the leg right 01, and we'll parent that to the C pelvis. There we go. And then let's take the leg left. Should be up here somewhere. There we go, leg left 01, and we'll also parent that to the pelvis controller instead of the actual pelvis itself. Okay, and then we'll lock that back up again. Make sure everything stays locked. Now what this should do is that when I rotate the pelvis controller, let's make that visible. When I rotate the pelvis controller, the leg should go with it, but if I want to scale and fix the way this pelvis is moving, because the pelvis is parented to that controller and nothing's parented to the pelvis, I can now scale it up and move it and make it work on the fly until I get something that is actually going to work for me. And I think what I'm also going to have to do is I'm going to have to turn this mask off. So we're going to go into Photoshop and just quickly fix this pelvis layer. So if I want to do that, I can reveal the layer source in the project, and then I can right click on it to reveal in Explorer. And that should pull up the file source. And then I can just double click on this, because we're going to have to fix this anyway, because it's getting in the way of all the different functions that we're needing to work with here. Let's scale this up over here. Now, when we fix this, there might be a slight shift in its positioning if we change the size of the actual layer. We're dealing with the 3/4 pelvis piece. Okay, 3/4, let's find that 3/4 pelvis. There it is right there. I'm just going to isolate it by alt-clicking that eye. And I'm going to clean it up. I want to get rid of all this extra stuff around it, and then I'll probably just draw a new bit over top of it. So we have this pen we can do that with. I'm going to select the stamp, and I'm just going to paint away some of this stuff here. Increase the brush size of the stamp. Everything will come back. We'll save it, and then close Photoshop once it's done saving. There we go. So let's close that out. What should happen is we should get an updated hip piece. We just have to right click and reload the footage, and we'll get an updated piece. It might have moved slightly, but I'm not really that worried about it at this point. And now what we can do is also delete this mask. There we go. And I'm finding the form of it's not quite right, but what we could do is go edit. Let's create an effect here. Distort. We could do a mesh warp. And put these divisions, columns, and rows down to 1 and 1. And then I can just change the shape of this slightly so that it's more of the round shape that I need. And then, I know that was elaborate, but sometimes you just have to do it. Sometimes I guess I should have made that piece a lot rounder. Let's go back up to our pieces. Let's hide everyone. And then what I can do is we'll just rotate this pelvis back to where it should be. And I may have to actually move it now because it's been repositioned slightly. So let's put the rotation to 0. So it does help that I actually have access to go down here, go to the pelvis, unlock it, and I'm just going to move it. It's more centered. Looks like everything moved a little bit. Well, let's have a look what happened here. Something happened. Find out just a second. Troubleshooting away. If I'm not making the process entirely clear. Okay, what do we have here? I might actually, let's take that pelvis and rotate it out and see how it looks. I'm going to grab that pelvis, rotate back. Doesn't look terrible. I almost feel like that the belt should go with it. I don't like how the belt just floats. I think what we need to do is we have a center And right now the belt is parented to that center. I think what we should do is take the C-center belt, the belt center, and actually parent that to the pelvis. We'll parent it to the control pelvis. So let's see what happens. So when I do C-center, everybody comes with. That's great. Now when I do the pelvis, I think that works a little better for me. We keep that belt going. It seems more like one complete piece. It feels a little better when it's actually moving. I'm just a lot happier with that. I think that's a better piece. And what I can do now is that pelvis is, it's cropping up a little bit. So let's just go in here and pull that pelvis. Let's fix that pelvis there. Here it is. I'm just going to put a little mask on that pelvis really quickly. So pelvis, mask that off a bit. That top piece is kind of getting in the way. It's punching through the top, and I don't like it. We'll just do this. There we go. And we'll mask, subtract. There. And I think we can just make it smooth off like that. Okay, close that away. And let's isolate that pelvis for a second and make sure it looks okay. I think it looks fine. There we go. Turn that back on. Now let's lock this because we don't need to work with it anymore. I know a lot has changed as we've worked through this, but this is actually part of the process. There's a lot of experimentation that has to happen, especially, like I've been doing a lot of these, and every puppet and every rig is a little bit different, and you have to solve things in a slightly different way. You try different things and experiment, think maybe it'll work one way, but it actually doesn't work quite the way you expect. So you have to kind of come up with other solutions and ways of doing things. And this is always a process of experimentation. So now we actually have a finished 3/4 rig, and we've solved some pretty significant problems that we were having with this character. And I think we're about ready to move on.
In the next lesson, we're going to go through the process of setting up the rig for the profile puppet. So we'll put in all the controls and apply the inverse kinematics and get the core and everything else working pretty quickly, since we've solved a lot of the procedural problems that we ran into on the 3/4 puppet. So it should be a lot more straightforward and just take one lesson to get through everything. If you like what e.d.Films is doing and want to stay up to date on the latest developments and tutorials, please show your support by liking us on Facebook.